probably 10 years plus or 20 years plus of, devouring personal growth content that didn't stick. Finally one thing,
Right.
one
Okay.
thing I sucked out of the ether, which was like, I'm sitting down, I'm like, God damn, I'm such a piece of shit. And then I heard the voice, man. It was like, I've literally been reading like Ziegler and Ogmandino and Tony Robbins. I was 19 years old at this point. So I'd been
Wow.
doing that for 30 years or 20 years.
Wow.
Right. And I'm like, God, you piece of shit. And I'm like, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. You can't be a piece of shit. You've done a lot of good shit. And I'm like, maybe I just have some problems. And I was like, oh, I'm not a problem. I just have problems that I've made other people problems. But, you
Sure.
know, at that point you then resolve to fix it. And I think that's so often where people get hung up is like reading the books is not enough. Listening to the
100%.
tapes and, audiobooks, those are great ways to keep your mind on good things, but they don't create good things. And you have to, you have to be 100% focused on the idea that life is a creation value. It's not, you don't, the lead measure of success is not how many books you read, it's how much work you do.
This episode is sponsored by Classical Conversations. Since 1997, Classical Conversations has been equipping families like yours with the resources to homeschool with confidence, following a classical curriculum rooted in a Christ-centered worldview alongside other families in a local community. Homeschooling is doable with Classical Conversations. Check out classicalconversations.com/Gibbons for more information. Again, that's classicalconversations.com/Gibbons, Gibbens.
What's going on, man?
Big Nick, what's up, bro? Good to meet you.
You too. How are you?
Dude, I'm stoked for this, man. This is awesome. Nick, how did you get started in this space of people pleasing? Because I know you're also like you do coaching and stuff as well. Did the coaching come first and then the people pleasing, or the people pleasing and then the coach? Like, tell me your story.
So the coaching came first. What had happened? So I became a coach in 2009. I've actually been a coach for over a decade. I guess 13 years now. And what had happened I guess it's 2010, so 12 years. So what had happened was I got divorced in 2010 due to my life literally falling apart in 2009. It just imploded due to some, past family trauma that everybody had kind of buried in their minds, the kind of shit. That resulted in, my getting divorced. Well, I was 30, or I guess I was 29 when that all started going down. And I had convinced myself that I had no idea how to meet women. When I did that, I'm like sitting, wow, what do I do? So I was flying around a lot. I worked for a wholesale manufacturer for clothing, and I'm flying around, pitching accounts. So I'm always on planes. So I thought I'd read, right? So I went about the task of learning how to meet chicks academically, um, which turns you into a pickup artist pretty quickly. So I became what's now known as a pickup artist. I do that for a while, and I get really good at it. And I start talking to guys, and they are like, "Hey, what are you doing? Work, sure." So I start with you guys. I was doing that for free. But what I started to notice was I looked back on my sales career, and I've had success in sales. And what I realized is that I was not doing much more than teaching a sales pitch and scripting. So I'm like, wow, all right. So we're teaching guys how to script a sales pitch. And the only reason scripting works in new sales environments is because it adds a level of confidence. You always know what to say. I'm like, so we're not dealing with a getting laid problem. We're dealing with a confidence problem at that time they called that inner game. Inner game meaning emotional intelligence. So I look at that and I'm like, well, how do I solve that problem rather than this? What do I say shit? right? So then I went to learn how to coach, and that was how that started. So I started taking coaching classes and shifted my focus from being, a pickup artist to a dating coach of sorts. And then from that, it was funny. I was working with men mostly, so the polarity shifted on me twice in my coaching career. I was working with men, and I was doing this thing where I would go into bars with all my guys. Right, we would go out like at 6:30 or 7, right as bar open, and I would teach, in the room, like, how do you be confident? What does it look like to be confident? I'm making dudes cry in public and shit. It was ridiculous. Um, so I'm going through all this, and we were teaching at a bar, in Denver called the Armory, and I think we were doing fears and limiting beliefs, and this group of girls comes in, a bachelorette party, right? They're like, "Oh my god, let's get shots," and then they see me over there teaching like a dickhead, right? And so I've got my board, and I'm coaching, and I'm surrounded, and all these dudes are good looking, and they're all successful, right? So here comes this bachelorette party, and they're like, "What the heck is this? What are you doing?" And guys like, "He's a dating coach. Fine. Like, we're trying to learn something." So it turns into this like kind of back and forth playful evening. Well, they're like, "Can we join you guys for like an hour?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So they join. Well, fast forward like a week later, and my phone is blowing up, and I'm like, "What is happening?" Well, all these girls wanted me to then come teach workshops for them and their friends. So I went from teaching dudes to teaching women inside of like, I think the whole time it was like 1 week I went from 100% men to 100% women.
No way.
And I'm like, this isn't what I wanted at all. Well, I was single at the time, so it wasn't awful. Right. So now I'm the dating guru for women and emotional intelligence. The problem was, of course, is that getting laid as a dating coach is almost impossible because everybody thinks you're a player. Right. So it increased the timeline on that trajectory. But so I ended up doing very well as a dating coach, and then I met my ex, and she didn't love that I was a dating coach, so I slowed that down and kind of went back into corporate America for a little bit. But then I founded a company called Phobia, and Phobia was a sales organization. We did was we worked with the top 20% of salespeople within an organization to help them accelerate based on the elimination of limiting beliefs and fears. Well, that required me going to the Coach Training Institute to learn about EQ and understanding emotional intelligence and how that would function within the scope of being a salesperson. So I did that. It was one of the largest failures of my career. It was
No way.
a great idea, um,
Yeah.
but I wasn't prepared. If you really look at what you talk about, you think about emotional intelligence. I hadn't built a container for that level of success yet. Like
Okay.
I wasn't prepared to do what I was trying to be what I was trying to be there.
Okay.
I wasn't confident enough, wasn't strong enough. There were too many things in my way that I couldn't get past. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was trauma and just kind of limiting beliefs and fears and all those things. So, it's weird because we always coach what we want to know
Right.
the most.
That's
So
right.
um, that's how, in Phobia, I exited on great terms with my partner. We still talk. He's a friend. He and his other partner went on it and stuff with it. It was fine. Well, after that, I got out of coaching for a little bit because I was burned out. Um, and I opened a bike bar company. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but it looks like a bus with pedals on it, where everybody faces each other and they
Yeah.
and they pedal around and get drunk. Yeah.
Are
So
kidding me.
yeah, I owned three of those at one point. Um, Two functioning, one not so much. Um,
Wow.
and I think I had 7 employees and a business manager. And, so this little company had I did what I do, which is I took a little thing and made it into a big thing. In 2018, I started to really suffer. My father had passed away, and he was also um, the source of my abuse when I was a kid. So I had dealt with the trauma of his abuse prior to that, and it was really, I mean, really, we're not talking about little, he was mean to me. We're talking about pretty severe, high level abuse, and so I had dealt with the trauma and all that stuff. Well, then the fucker gets leukemia and he croaks, right? So all of the wounds then get reopened, and I still and flip out from like 216 to 2018.
Wow.
Right. And so I'm losing my mind. Right. And I think it was April 16th of 2018. I was sitting on a bar stool at 11 o'clock in the morning. That was my fourth day in a row being at that same bar stool at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
I woke up next to a lover and friend of mine who has now also kind of entered recovery and is doing really well. And I said, I'm really sick. And she said, I know. And I said, I got to go. She's like, okay. She had to go to work. And I said, take my car. I'll see you tonight. So anyway, I walked to the bar and I sat there. I sat down and I had bought my pack of smokes that I got every morning. And I ordered my hamburger that I ordered every morning. And I saw it all sitting in front of me. And I remember this moment. Nothing looked real anymore. Where the bar stool just felt different. And I remember the bottles and like the infused vodkas and everything behind the bar. And it just all looked like a copy of a copy of a copy. Like nothing made sense. And that was the day I called my mom and said, I need you to sell everything and put me in rehab. And
Wow.
the rest is history. Since then, I've owned a small roofing company. I've done all kinds of cool things, but I entered the coaching world again last year because it's my true love. It's the thing I do the best, and it's healing in a lot of ways for me to do this.
Yeah. Dude, so thank you for your vulnerability and sharing all that stuff, man. That's no joke. So one of my things about emotional growth and emotional healing is, in my
Mhm.
opinion, it takes a degree of self-awareness to even get to that point. Were you so because you had already kind of entered in the coaching, like, okay, I got so many questions, dude. Do, were you always when did your self-awareness start to grow, and how did your self-awareness start to grow?
I think I became, if you look at yourself like a robot, I think I became sentient on April 16th of 20. I really do. I had done a lot of personal growth work up to that point. Nothing ever seemed to stick for me. So I would read the books and I would listen to the podcasts. I would watch the videos, and Zig Ziglar was my personal coach when I was a kid. Like I knew the man personally, and well, that's a whole nother story. But I think that was the day that I figured out that something was wrong. Right. I had lost my wife, not lost her. I mean, she didn't die. She just left me because I was a drunk maniac. And then, then I had a girlfriend and I lost her. And then like everything was just falling apart. And I thought, this is a me problem. And like, I just looked back at my life and it was like, every single problem I have seems to replay itself. And if that's going to keep happening, that means it's a me issue. Like I am the common denominator in this issue. And it was always around women. And it was always around relationships. It was always around drinking. All right, what happens if I eliminate drinking? Right. And when I did, that opened up this, what is this behavior where I'm constantly overgiving, where I'm constantly in a fear headspace that people are going to leave me? What is this massive fear of abandonment? And how has my trauma impacted that? That came like within weeks of getting sober. It was bizarre.
Wow.
Like people ask me all the time, like, how do I stop people pleasing? I say, how much do you drink?
No way.
Yeah. And they say a lot. And I go, stop that first, because that'll solve the problem. Alcohol by its design. And by the way, I love alcohol. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It's a fun drug. Otherwise I wouldn't have done it so well. Right. So, and nobody I know wants to quit drinking. Not even alcoholics want to quit drinking. Right. That's why they're alcoholics.
Right. Right.
So, it was profound to me that when I realized what alcohol does, it lowers your inhibition, right? Which means it deletes future thought. So you lose grasp of that there is a future. You're in the now only. You become very narcissistic when you drink, right? Alcohol is a narcissist by its defining value. It's only for now, and it's only about you, right? So when I realized I took that substance out of my body, then I was like, Now I feel like a piece of shit, right? Because I'm looking at my ex going, okay, maybe I was kind of emotionally abusive,
Right.
right? Maybe that's a
Ah.
thing, right?
Mm.
And then, I looked at the girlfriend situation. I'm like, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, right? Maybe I should have spent some time healing. And then I was like, maybe the first marriage that dissolved and the second marriage that dissolved had something to do with these unresolved trauma problems. Right? So I'm looking at all this stuff going, okay, it's definitely you, which then, you come to a place where you have to really function in acceptance. And you say to yourself, all right, well, what the, am I a piece of shit? Right? Like, how bad do I could suck?
Right.
Which is at the point that I had the realization, I am not a problem. I have problems.
Okay,
And
okay, whoa, 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 whoa. That's a major minor detail there. So how so you said something in 10 seconds that took me probably 10 years to actually do in practice. Right? So because my identity was I was completely jacked up and
right,
I am the failure, right? Me, that is my actual identity.
right.
And it took me literally probably a decade to separate, oh, okay, maybe I'm not actually a failure myself, but I have failed a truckload. How did you do that? How did you make that separation?
I don't really know the answer to that. I think probably 10 years plus or 20 years plus of, devouring personal growth content that didn't stick. Finally one thing,
Right.
one
Okay.
thing I sucked out of the ether, which was like, I'm sitting down, I'm like, damn, I'm such a piece of shit. And then I heard the voice, man. It was like, I've literally been reading like Ziegler and Ogmandino and Tony Robbins. I was 19 years old at this point. So I'd been doing
Oh,
that for 30 years or 20 years.
wow.
Right. And I'm like, God, you piece of shit. And I'm like, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. You can't be a piece of shit. You've done a lot of good shit. And I'm like, maybe I just have some problems. And I was like, oh, I'm not a problem. I just have problems that I've made other people problems. But, you
Sure.
know, at that point you then resolve to fix it. And I think that's so often where people get hung up is like reading the books is not enough. Listening to the
100%.
tapes and, audiobooks, those are great ways to keep your mind on good things, but they don't create good things. And you have to, be 100% focused on the idea that life is a creation value. It's not, you don't, the lead measure of success is not how many books you read, it's how much work you do.
Yeah, it's not consumption, it's
Right.
application. It right in
Right.
my opinion. Yeah.
And I think that's where I think TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, and, we've created an environment where personal growth material is readily available and is free. Right. So people are consuming consumption with, action, and it's not that. And, unfortunately, I think it's crippled a lot of people. I think it's brought a lot of awareness to the space. I think that's great. Uh, I think it's also kind of put up a lot of snake oil coaches, 26-year-olds with, dad's money telling me how to manifest a Ferrari
Right.
seems to be a lot of things,
Right.
um, and it's not to say that I have anything against a 26-year-old coach. I think they're valuable human beings, but I also think that, um, what are you going to teach somebody like me? You know, 3 bouts with alcoholism, 3 divorces, one run to rehab. Like, how much wisdom do you have against that information?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the issue consumption versus action has been a real focusing point for me. And it was in rehab I learned to take action. Um, and to this day, I'm glad I went to rehab. I don't think they're hugely valuable in the United States, but I think they're a good place to get sober for 30 days.
Okay.
Um, I don't think I've worked in those centers now too. I coached in rehab centers, after I got out, to help other people with my problem. And um, that was interesting because I started to really recognize it, the gaps in the healthcare system. And then
Mm.
I've done a lot of research on rehab centers and prisons, even overseas. And They do a hell of a lot better job. Um,
Really?
oh yeah, recidivism rate on heroin in Portugal is lower than 60%, which is uh, the recidivism rate in the United States is over 90.
What? Okay, now what is recidivism?
Means the people that go back out.
Oh,
Yeah. So,
okay.
and that's because if you look at the Portuguese healthcare system, for instance, they don't criminalize drugs anymore, drug use. So
Wow.
they spend all their money on treatment rather than enforcement. So you get caught using heroin, you get a ticket. The ticket's like $10. It's nothing. You go in front of a panel to pay that ticket. Or that'll get you in trouble to not go in front of a panel. And they say, "Hey, do you want to get help?" I've never met a heroin addict that wasn't like help me,
Help me.
right?
Oh,
So they've now stopped criminalizing it, stopped arresting people. Their jail population is down to next to nothing, and they're helping people. Yeah, focus on health and you get health.
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. Wow, that's fascinating. So, so what was the fork in the road, the decision point in your life that led you down within this, massive world of healing and emotional health, mental health stuff, specifically into the people pleasing space? What was that about?
I was dealing with some personal things when I dropped my first video that were around that,
How did
and
you
then
know?
I don't know. Like I think you ever just do a thing and then wonder, like, if I look back on why I started the Real Cost of People Pleasing series, which was like my 15 seconds, just like slap you in the face fucking videos, is because I was going crazy and I needed to just talk. Right. Well, I happen to be a very talented coach and I happen to know a lot about external validation. And so, you know, I remember the first time I did one, um, I think I was in Denver and I was like, real cost of people pleasing. And that was my
Got it.
and it was so funny because like it went crazy on me. 3 months later, and I've made these videos over and over and over again. You make one that goes to 1.5 million, you're like, surely lightning won't strike twice, right? Well,
Right.
then it did, and I get like 400,000 or 500,000 on a video. It never got to 1 million. Now I've done 1 million like 4 times in the last 3 months, and I'm like, what is happening? Well,
Wow.
I think if I look at that trajectory, it's fascinating because it's it speaks to a lot of what I teach people, which is, habits are formed through repetition over time, and you get good at anything you practice, right? Including not practicing.
Mm,
So I was creating 3 pieces of content a day for 8 months before I went, or 4 months before I went viral. And then it was another 8 months before I went viral again. Right. And almost 12 months. So if you look at, the timeline, it's wild how long it took me to go, to get to the next level of my progression. I went to bed last night. I think I was at 149,700. I thought I'd wake up with 150. I woke up 153. So, if I drop another video this week that does anything, I'll end up at 200 a year, which is fucking wacky. Right.
wow.
And that's awesome. But at the same time, terrifying because people are, listening, trusting me. Um,
Right.
and
Right.
and believe me, I still go through the moments where I'm like, you think I'm intelligent. That's scary. That's scarier for you than me. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I don't know if that answered the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. That's great. So making that first kind of chunk of videos, like, man, okay, people pleasing. What are some of the biggest insights that you have gleaned now being, really focused specifically in this area of people pleasing?
Oh, let me ask you a question in return on that. What do you think when you hear the term people pleasing? Like, what do you think the number one issue is?
Okay, that's great because I am a recovering people pleaser addict of probably 4 decades. So, um, let's see. So let me ask myself what has been one of my, well, I will tell you one of mine is, and kind of how I explain it with some of the clients that I work with, and even on my podcast. I am like the real life Gilligan, right, from Gilligan's Island,
Okay.
right? I had no, and I didn't even realize it because I had no self awareness, but I had no opinions, I had no thoughts, I had no perspectives, I had no even my own values, my own dreams and goals. Dude, nothing was original. It was like, well, what do you think, Nick? Well, what do you, okay, yeah, I like what Nick said. Nick, I'm gonna do what you like. I never had my own stuff, right? And so
Right.
anyway, that was indecisiveness. Dude, I could list 100 consequences, decision making. Dude,
Mm-hmm.
the vast majority, 99% of my decisions I made were based on what I thought other people would think of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I could list 100 issues.
Sure. So what you're saying is that it was a loss of self.
100%, dude.
Right.
100%. Didn't even know I'm just now learning myself over the past 3 years now,
Right.
4 years.
What if I told you you were wrong?
I'm open.
Okay. The number one problem in people pleasing isn't loss or not knowing oneself. It's honesty.
It's honesty. Okay, hit me.
Okay.
Keep going.
So you know exactly who you are. Everyone does. You just don't want to admit it. You know what you like and don't like. You're just afraid to say it. You have all of the components of a full life and human. It's that you don't want to admit it because you're afraid of what other people will think of it. And you've buried it so long that you think it's missing, but it's not. So as you uncover it piece by piece by piece, you recognize that you have been dishonest with yourself and everyone around you for decades.
Okay, so I dig that like a shovel. So then let me try to put what you just said into context with how my experience was. I genuinely, dude, if you had asked me again 4 years ago, what do you like? What are your goals? I would say, dude, I have no idea. I genuinely would tell you I have no idea. Now
Well, yeah.
I like, you know what I'm saying? So like it wouldn't be like, man, I'm lying to Nick. I really like I like this Yeti mug, but I
Right.
don't want to tell him because I'm scared. I genuinely couldn't have told you that I like a Yeti mug. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so
But you had become so externally validated that you had, and that's the issue, right? So when I say it's honesty, it turns into other shit. But the core issue is that you had spent so much time placating everybody else with what they wanted and not talking about who you are and what your opinions are, that you forgot you had any at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So now as you recover, what I see, one of the things I see in pleasers so often is they think the opposite is to be a dickhead. Well, it's not. Right. They think if I stop people pleasing, then I have to be a jerk. Well, no, that's not accurate. When you stop people pleasing, you get to be something totally different, which is kind and honest.
Interesting.
So when you think about the difference between, what does it mean to be a people pleaser versus what does it mean to not be a people? So the opposite of people pleasing is not being a people pleaser. It's not being a dick. Okay. A people pleaser is somebody who sabotages their own self-worth and their own self-image and their own desires and needs for the sake of being liked, not for anyone else, for the sake of being liked. That's one of the main dishonest points inside of people pleasing, is that they think they're being good to other people. Right. So in dishonesty is weird because you don't realize it, but you are not being honest with you. And that is also a lie. Right. And realistically, if somebody comes up to you, let's say 4 years ago, somebody popped up to you and like, you're in the middle of something, or like, hey, do you want to go grab lunch? And you really didn't want to, you'd have gone anyway.
Dude, 100%, bro.
Right. And that would have been
no. Never.
Right. What do you call it when you say something and it's not true?
Liar.
Right. So when you look at people pleasers, one of the things that we work on almost immediately, the idea of truthfulness and what does it look like to be internally validated by the truth, right? And then to speak it. Well, when you're dealing with somebody that hasn't, I'll give your listeners one of my favorite exercises. This is something I work with on all my coaching clients. Is I want you to spend a week, and I want you to say no to everything. Not one request do I want an affirmative to for an entire week. Now,
Wow.
now there's rules to the game. Okay, so the game goes like this, and you have to gamify it, otherwise it's no fun, right? So you have to count how many times you say no, figure out a tracking device for that, so you can click it on your phone. So you have to figure out how many times in a week you actually say. So that's part of the game. Can I beat yesterday? Then you have to inform your family that you're doing this exercise. You know, the top 5 people essentially you communicate with, whether it's your family, your boss, your business managers, whoever. You need to let them know that you're going to be doing this, right? And just tell them, you know, I'm on a growth journey and I'm trying some shit, and I want to be better at my job, better as a husband, better as a father, better. And to do that, I need to learn to say no. Okay, great. Okay, most people will agree, unless they're a dick. Then, and this is the funny part, you have to celebrate every no. Final rule of the game is first you tell them, okay?
Yeah.
Then you say the no,
Yeah.
right? Then you celebrate the no.
Okay.
I have this written down. Have you ever had that experience where you've done something 2,700 times and
Absolutely, brother.
it absolutely will not come to you? I'm going to quit trying to force this. It'll come back to me.
Yeah. No, let me ask you this. So let me ask you
Sure.
this. So when you say celebrate a no, I don't even know what what does that look like?
It could be as simple as just patting yourself on the back,
Okay.
you know, and just recognizing that you're doing something
Okay.
for yourself.
Okay.
I think too many people don't know to do that, you know.
Absolutely.
I've said a lot of times that, you know, just the value of not drinking for me wasn't it, right? Not, you know, the value of not drinking and using cocaine like a crazy person. Maintaining that ability had nothing to do with sobriety. It had to do with my own happiness, because happiness will keep you sober, and sober doesn't make you happy. Sober is miserable.
Wow. Interesting. As a, recovering people pleaser, what is your new definition of happiness? What does happiness look like to you?
I think to wake up and know every day that I'm okay. If you look at, you know, advertising, you know, even as you know, the very first ads that were ever put out, what are they really selling, right? Um, they're selling that you are okay. They're basically saying that you are okay. And when I wake up in the morning, I need to know, you know, internally in my own heart that I'm okay.
Hmm.
And when I found that, when I was able to maintain that, it changed the way I live my life. I remembered the 4th rule. Okay. So I'm going to do it first. So I remember it's you have the right to change your mind.
You have the right to change
Right.
your mind.
So here's the deal. First, you have to commit to the no. Then you tell your family, celebrate your wins. And in that commitment, you have to tell everybody, I reserve the right to change my mind. Because here's the deal. Knew it would come to me. Here's the deal on no. If I had said, Noble, I will 100% do your podcast. And then an hour ago, I'd called you and said, I can't make it, or I don't want to do it anymore. You'd have been okay. But what would have been your feeling?
No, well, now I respect people's boundaries. So like,
Right.
I'd be like, hey, that's totally cool. I mean, I'd be disappointed that, hey,
Right. You're disappointed. Perfect.
yeah,
Right. What if I had said no, and then I called you and said yes?
I'd be stoked.
Right. So which one's easier to come back from?
Probably the second one.
Right.
Fascinating.
So if you say yes to everything and then have to change your mind, you're a dickhead.
Right.
But if you say no and then change your mind, you're a hero.
That is so good, man. Wow. Okay. Love it. Love it. How long did it take you to fully heal or recover from being a people pleaser?
You never do.
Oh, interesting.
So it's, you know how there's parts of every personality that are kind of a lifelong journey,
Sure. Okay.
right?
Got it.
And I am markedly better than I've ever been in my life. Like, I have firm boundaries. I say no. I'm very communicative. Even with my girlfriend, you know, that those relationships have changed drastically because it's not like, I don't tolerate any bullshit. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure.
It's, I express my feelings of what I need. Right. And that is the basis of emotional intelligence, right? If you look at, the limbic system and how that all operates, your mind, your body, and your emotions all working together in unison, right?
Mm.
Well, when I see people getting stuck in the body emotional frame where they're in that danger zone where they can't think, that's where your lizard brain kicks in, right? It's like, we just got to do something, right? It's like this awful little thing chirping in your ear. When I see that happen for people, I know how to rewire it, which is just to engage the mind. It's a super simple exercise. If you feel yourself starting to slip into that yes pattern, you need to ask yourself, what am I believing about me? What am I believing? Usually it's going to be one of two things. I'm either, not appreciated or not loved in some form or another. I'm not good enough. I'm not, all right. So that'll pop. Okay. What am I doing that, reinforces that belief? I use this almost every day, by the way. What am I doing that reinforces that? Well, that's pretty simple. I'm either obsessing or ruminating, or I'm not taking action, or I am doing something, whatever it is. So for the alcoholic, is pretty easy. Usually they're going to a place they shouldn't be and they can know it, right? Or they're doing something they shouldn't be doing and they're not being honest about it, right? The rooms of I don't find the recovery rooms to be helpful to me, but I learned a lot in those places. And one of the things that I think is really vital is that your secrets keep you sick. But the next question is, what do I want to believe about myself? Like, what do I really want to believe? Like, if I'm doing this default belief, like, which is I'm not good enough, what do I want to believe? Well, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. I'm sexy. I'm good looking, whatever. Hey, well, how do I need to act to make that happen? Right. What you're doing is you're turning the brain, because the emotional intelligence isn't, you know this as well as I do, that the term emotional intelligence really only means to choose how you move. So if you look at the words broken down, EQ or emotional intelligence, intellect means to choose, emotion means to move. Choose how you move.
Wow.
It's really not that challenging a concept, but it's really hard if you don't turn your brain on. So
and it's the other times where I found it's incredibly hard to choose how I move. In fact, this just happened to me recently. Thank God, the number of times that I've been emotionally hijacked since I've been on this healing journey has been exponentially less than I used to get, but I still get them every now and then. And one was probably 3 weeks ago. I went super south and I was totally emotionally hijacked, and probably for a good 12 hours. And what really pissed me off about the whole experience was I didn't even realize it that I was in there until I started to come out of it.
really,
Yes. So when in that kind of scenario, when someone is emotionally hijacked, what have you found to be helpful or useful?
I think those 4 questions are generally how I would tell people to move.
Okay. Okay.
And I trained as a private pilot in 2019, which was a lot of fun. And one of the things I learned that I think was really valuable was the idea of what they call amygdala jacking, where
Okay.
your amygdala kicks in and it just turns on your lizard brain. That happens to pilots, when especially new pilots. And that's really what's happening is you're going into your fight, flight, fawn, freeze responses, right? And those are all controlled by the amygdala, right? So the brain just goes, moo,
Right.
and you don't know what to do, right?
Right.
So the easiest thing to do is take a breath and engage your mind, engage your frontal lobe, and get it to make decisions for you, rather than, because the other thing that, there's 2 places or 3 places really you can get stuck. You can get stuck in that danger zone, your body and your emotional frame. And then when you're in between your mind and your emotions, you're generally in a stress position, where your mind is going one way and your emotions are going another. I see this in breakups all the time, where the person's bad for you, they treat you like shit, blah 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 blah, but I've got history and it's going to make me sad and I don't want to be lonely. And then, they're bouncing off against each other and that creates stress. And then you have your body and your mind. When they play together without your emotions, it gets wonky too, because what do you think happens then? Well, that's where you start 50 projects and finish nothing, and you become totally paralyzed by analysis.
Wow. No idea what you're talking about.
Oh, okay.
I'm joking. I did that for decades, bro.
Right. Where you get absolutely paralyzed.
100%, man. 100%. Oh, this is so good, man. Dude, Nick, this is fire. Okay. What's a question that I should ask that I haven't asked yet?
I think people pleasing is a really challenging thing. And I think I focus on it heavily because that would be a good question, would be, what do you think the cost of this is to people?
Ooh,
Um,
wow.
and when I think I'm real passionate about it, real driven by it, because I know what it costs. And I know what those limiting beliefs cost. And I know what those fears cost. And I've never met a single man or woman that didn't need to get past this. That came through my energy. And if you're listening to it now and you're thinking to yourself, Jesus, that's me. Well, that's probably true, and that's okay. It's like any other problem. If you can, Viktor Frankl and Scott Peck, both in some way or another, say that life is hard, and how you choose to deal with that being hard, how you choose to deal with suffering, is the definition of your meaning. And you've been dealing with suffering by default rather than by intention. When you start to focus the laser beam on joy, when you start to focus on not positivity in the toxic sense where you're like, everything is great, because dude, listen, sometimes life sucks. And when you start to focus yourself on that system of living, then you start to be able to experience freedom through acceptance and realizing, not everybody's supposed to like you is a great thing that a lot of coaches say, and they're like, not everybody's supposed to like you. Well, so fucking what? You have to accept, not only is not everybody's supposed to, you have to accept that not everybody does, no matter what you think.
Right.
Right. Not everybody's gonna like you. Not everybody does like you, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you chameleon, no matter how many ways you bend yourself over for, everybody out there. You're not going to be liked by everybody. In fact, trying to be liked by everybody sabotages the people that actually do like you, because it spreads you so fucking thin that you can't concentrate on the things that matter.
Mm.
And the way out of that is through emotional intelligence. The way out of that is through understanding that life is supposed to be designed by you, and if you're in misery, that's part of your choice. And that's a really hard realization for people is, most of the time, continued misery and suffering is a decision you've made.
Yeah. Or yeah. Or I was going to say maybe a lack of a decision, but which is also a decision.
Right. Right. Indecisions is quite a decision, actually.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Right.
Man, Nick, this has been amazing. How do we follow you? How do we find you?
Well, I would prefer, if you're listening to this, to hop on my Instagram. All of my TikTok feed goes over there. It's the People Displeaser on Instagram, and then People Displeaser on TikTok. My TikTok following is obviously massive, and it's great. If you want to follow me there, do it. I will be putting out that 5-day mini masterclass that you and I talked about. I'll be putting that out in the next week or two. It's going to be free. It's like I said, I want people to have the resources they need, at least at some level. If I have to do it at cost, I'll do it at cost. But that's not going to be a product by any stretch of the imagination. It's really there to help people and to give people something valuable. And then after that, we'll be doing the live courses. They're going to be starting probably, I'd say the 15th, kind of mid-January is my timeline for that. And that's going to be a very, very limited audience. So, if you want seats to that, shoot me an email, nick@nickpollard.com, and let me know that you're interested, and I'll get in touch with you. Because I'm only taking 20 people in that class, and it'll fill up. I mean, my coaching books are now booked all the way through January, so I don't have any more bandwidth.
Awesome. And for those of y'all that are watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, I will have all those that information that Nick just shared on the show notes. So you'll be able to go to the show notes and get all that information. Nick, can't thank you enough, brother. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hopefully collaborate in the future at some point.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.